All right, so hello everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Urban Blueprint, a podcast created by the Uvic Real Estate Club to help educate students about the real estate industry. Now, today's episode is what I like to tentatively call Real Estate 101. Today is for those of you out there who are looking to learn more about the wider umbrella of the industry, and today we have a very special guest to help us do that. It's my pleasure to welcome Amanda Neal to the show. Amanda is the Senior Vice President of Avis & Young in the beautiful building we're in here now, a company that creates economic, social, and environmental value as global real estate advisors. Amanda has been working in commercial real estate since 2004 and sports a diverse portfolio of local, national, and international clients. Combine her knowledge of the industry with her seats of the boards of multiple organizations that act as pillars to the real estate community, and we are truly lucky to have her with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. That's quite the introduction. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I know we were just talking before about how real estate can be so different every day.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting to hear. And I know a lot of people out there are really confused maybe at what exactly happens on a day-to-day basis. So it's going to be really good to get your insight.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to share my insights, my path to where I am right now, and any other questions you have.
Absolutely. Thanks. So we'll just get started. Yeah. So
Sure.
I guess what do you do for work here at Avis & Young?
Yeah. So I mean, I am a part owner in the Avis & Young Victoria office, and so I do have some administrative tasks on that end. In leadership and managing the business of the office, but my primary role is as a broker in the market myself. And so I do sales and leasing of commercial properties, and that can involve anything from office, industrial, retail, development land, as well as multifamily, so apartment buildings. And yeah, it's a diverse cross section. There are in bigger markets, you'll be a little more specialized usually, so you'll kind of choose your path, and certainly there are areas within that I tend to focus more on, and it sort of snowballs, right, the business in terms of where your focus and priorities are.
Right.
So office and industrial is where I tend to spend a lot of my time.
That makes sense. And as a company, Avison does all those different branches.
Absolutely, and even beyond. I mean, in the Victoria market, we're a more boutique office, but in the larger markets, we offer a whole cross section of services. So there's property management, there's consultation, there's project management, there is appraisal. It's a whole wide variety of kind of industry professionals coming together under one roof to work together,
right.
And really a whole host of real estate solutions for clients so that they can take you from the beginning to the end, right? Even on the lending side. So
yeah. Absolutely. So we were talking earlier too about how you came up through UVic, and just about the start of your journey too. So I was hoping we could get a bit of sense of how you got to where you are now, maybe starting from step one.
Absolutely. So for me, this was never kind of my grand vision. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So while I was attending UVic, I was choosing courses that I was most interested in and hoping that would help navigate me to wherever I was meant to be. And to find something that I was truly and genuinely passionate and interested. So UVic for me was a whole cross section of different types of courses and learning, and it served me well. I mean, I certainly, learned, I think, valuable skills when it comes to writing and to, psychology is very important in real estate, and learning how to work with people. And there was so much value add. But it was really only afterwards that I went out and I joined a real estate office on the admin side, mostly because I wanted a 9-to-5, Monday to Friday job. While I was going to UVic, I was working at WestJet. And that was fantastic. It was a great learning experience, but the shift work was not something that I wanted to carry on with.
Right.
So once I got into the real estate office and started to see how my colleagues worked and what that entailed, that's when I decided, okay, this is what I want to pursue as my career. And then I took the education that was necessary, specific to real estate. So I did the Urban Land Economics program, the diploma through Sauder Business School, and that really taught me the language of real estate and gave me the confidence that I needed to, especially in commercial real estate, because there's different areas you can go into in that program.
Right.
And then when I finished that, I did my real estate license. So that obviously, so I could actually.
And I know with the license you mentioned Sauder. Mm-hmm. From what I understand, every province can only have one school that does real estate education.
That may be.
I think that's the case. So I know that UBC is the one for BC. So I was just wondering, speaking on that, What was your experience there, just in terms of the education?
It was great. It was very practical. And it was, my real estate license, the act of getting my license was a lot less relevant, to be honest.
Right.
It was good and it's necessary, but it was heavily geared towards residential sales.
Right.
So as a commercial and as knowing that was my focus, much of the content was not things that I do day to day.
Right.
But it is necessary and it's all a value add, right? It's all learning. But I found UBC's diploma was in urban land economics. That was much more practical to what I do day to day. And you could put your focus, there's appraisal, development. What were the other ones? Anyways, there's a few different areas you can kind of go down and you do assignments and you do, practical learning exercises, and there's group exercises where I learned and met other industry professionals. So
right.
That was where I think I got my real confidence, because in this market, in any market, I think you want to know the language. You want to know that when you enter a room and you're questioned or challenged, that you can rise to the occasion. And commercial real estate, like a lot of different professions, has a bit of a language that you have to learn, right?
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned the difference between residential and commercial in there. So just as a broad sense, what are the main differences between commercial and residential real estate?
Yeah. Well, I've never done residential. I've only
Right.
done commercial, but I can say, just as having done commercial and having many, many friends who do residential, and I work alongside them, our worlds are a little different. I would say residential is much more streamlined because
Right.
it represents a much more considerable and significant amount of the transactions that are happening.
Right.
So the documentation is more streamlined. You can pull up your form on MLS and you can fill in the blanks, and it's a little more straightforward from that perspective, right? And the data is available, so you can print out surveys and spreadsheets and comparable sales and so on, and it's much more seamless because it's there, and it's an easier comparative in the sense that when you're looking at houses, you're saying, okay, this area, this many beds, baths, etc., square footage, much a little easier on that front perhaps to draw conclusions. Whereas I think in commercial, especially, and I'm speaking more to the smaller market, data is a little more readily available in bigger markets, so Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, etc. Victoria, though, it's really tricky.
Right.
It's tricky to get the data. It's tricky to get the information, and properties are quite unique. So when we use the term comparables, we use it pretty lightly because you're looking at, they are quite different. And so you really are having to kind of dive into the research element of it a little bit more. And I will say that, our documentation is different too by virtue, because there's a lot of unique features to each transaction, whether it's tenancies you're considering or not considering, whether it's improvements that need to be done or not, how the space is being delivered. There's so much more involved, both on the sale and lease transaction in general terms. Of course, there's exceptions too.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting you keep bringing up sales, and it's something that I was curious about is, would you say real estate is a lot more about people than it is the
bricks and mortar?
The bricks and mortar. Would you say it's
all
more
about people? It's all about people. I mean, you have to understand the bricks and mortar, and you have to be able to provide insights and commentary and connections and be able to address concerns and so on and present the opportunity appropriately. But I would suggest a lot of business is about people. It's about working with people, being able to work with people, and not just your own clients, but working with your counterparts. So working with other realtors, in my case, working with lawyers, working with appraisers, working with all the industry professionals that come together sort of as a team in any given transaction to see it from one end to the other.
Right.
And if you struggle with that, I think you'll struggle to see success. It is certainly a
people business.
Yeah, we call it a contact sport in our office.
Okay, that's a good. I like that. Yeah.
So you need contacts, and you need to know how to work with people.
Okay, yeah, I like that contact sport. That's a good analogy. I've never heard that one before.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I guess too, for somebody who was new to the real estate industry and is just trying to learn about what roles are available, you mentioned appraiser, developer. for someone who may not know the difference between a lot of those different roles, can you maybe just lay out the basics of people you may work with or people in your office?
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing is I think that you can find yourself going down one path in the industry, and then you can kind of divert. So there are different opportunities, and we work closely with lenders. So there's lots of people who work with banks and secondary lenders that are important to us, right? Because they're important to our clients, and so those folks are heavily involved in real estate. You can go down the lending environment. Appraisers are crucial, and you can go down the development path, and there's lots of different developers out there too. So whether you're talking about more townhouse versus multifamily, you can work for a larger developer, right? And be in their real estate department. You can work for one of the big REITs and be responsible for managing, their tenancies, whether it's shopping centers or what have you. So there's different paths even within as a realtor that you can take. One of the reasons I joined JJ Barnaky at the time was because my brother was working with JJ Barnaky in Toronto and said, I think you'd be a great realtor. Once I finished UVic, he said, you should go work in a real estate office. We have one out there. Go see if there's a position you can do there and see if you like it. And so at the time he was a broker, and now he works with Cadillac Fairview, and he does the leasing of their retail centers back east. So you can move in different directions, right? With real estate,
really
which I like.
Your journey is.
Well, that's just it, right? Like it's where your interest lies and what you want to do. Marketing, right? Like there's any number of marketing avenues. Real estate as well. So, yeah.
So I guess just building off that too. Where would you mentioned that somebody said that you would be good as a real estate agent? I'm just wondering, for someone who is trying to figure out where they may fit in this industry, they have a passion for real estate, whether it's design or they like working with people, as we mentioned earlier. Where would you say they could try and carve out their niche, and how could they go about doing that?
It's a good question. I mean, I think they'd want to speak with professionals in the industry in those different sectors and learn a little bit about what their day-to-day looks like. Because I think from the outside, things can look a little different, right? I think sometimes realtors are perceived as, oh, you go to all these networking events and lunches and you're out at all these parties and so on. That might be true for some people, for sure. And it depends on your focus and what type of business you're doing. But for others, it's very much at your computer for many, many hours a day, working through long documents, whether it's leases or purchase and sale agreements or working through due diligence, which can take many months in some cases, right? So it's very pragmatic. And they can all look a little bit different in how you do your work, right? And appraisals are interesting, right? You're diving into different properties and you're working with realtors, right? That information has to come from somewhere. So it's a real sharing of knowledge between all the industries, and there's definitely differences between them, but I would say you'd want to speak with the people in your market, because it does vary city to city as well, right? What's true in Victoria may not be true at all in Vancouver. Different markets. So you'd want to talk to people in the market you want to operate in those different respective fields, and then try it out. There's no harm in going and saying, hey, can I shadow you, or can I work for you as whatever that looks like, an admin or assistant, and then you really get to have the insight as to what a day-to-day looks and feels like. I know. And choose accordingly. Right?
I know when I was first getting into real estate, I did similar. Just went on LinkedIn, went on different places, just reached out to people, and you'd be surprised that obviously you're wonderful. A lot of other people are like you; they're really open to helping out someone who is in their position. So you'd be surprised. So I totally agree with that.
And I think the biggest thing when you're young, I remember for me, anyways, I felt like, I can't make the wrong decision. Like, this is so big, and it felt so massive, the idea of choosing a direction. And now I look back and I realize that it doesn't need to be, like everything. You can choose, and if it's not the right fit, you pivot and you do something different. And what you've done is not lost. It's another added value that you can offer in whatever the next, business is that you decide to pursue. So
Absolutely.
it's all learning. It's all good. And it
It's
will
all
help
experience.
serve you. Yeah. And the relationships, one of my colleague Dave, it really served him well, having done all that appraisal work and getting to know different owners and developers and professionals around the city, so that when he did transfer and become a broker, I think that was certainly a benefit, right?
Yeah, well, and especially in a place like Victoria, because it's such a small circle here.
Absolutely.
Everyone's 2 connections away.
And really,
honestly, or
and
one,
your knowledge
honestly.
of properties, all of a sudden you're like, hey, I appraise that building, or I walk through that building, or I'm familiar with that building. It's familiarity, it's knowledge. There's lots of benefits, I think.
I run past it every morning.
Right.
My jogger.
Well, that's the thing as a realtor, right? Whenever you get involved with real estate, you look at the world a little differently.
Yeah.
I think prior to becoming involved in real estate, I would drive to A to B and not pay any attention because I was just focused on getting to where I wanted to go. Now, you're looking around, you're intentionally driving different routes to see what's going on different streets, to see what's going on in different communities, what's new, who signs up, what's happening. And it matters, right? You're engaged.
And that's something that I was really curious about, that work-life balance, right? You're saying, is it like, for someone especially that works in sales, is it something that's always flicked on for you? Or do you ever have a time where it's off? How do you manage that work-life balance with a job like this? Do you?
Pretty tricky. Yeah. Pretty tricky, to be fair. It is. It's a constant struggle. I think to be successful and when you want to be successful, you want to be fully engaged, you want to be responsive as much as possible, almost to your own detriment, where you have to kind of scale it back once in a while and really reassess what matters. And when it's on you and your performance, you're commission based as a realtor. So it's directly correlated, right? And so you really want to do your very best. But once I have 3 daughters, they're 6, 8, and 10. And so once I started having kids, I really had to reevaluate how I was spending my time.
Yeah.
So prior to kids, I certainly had no issue 8 to 12 hours a day, working as much as I needed to, grinding, right? But I realized after I had kids, I was using a lot of my time inefficiently too, because I had all the time.
Right.
And so I really reined it in and said, okay, I need to be really efficient with my time, and I need to be able to produce the same, if not better. And I did. I actually improved my performance after having kids.
Yeah.
And I just became very efficient, very mindful. I learned how to say no. I didn't know how to say no.
Valuable skill.
Prior to kids, but my time became so valuable that I thought, no, I have to say no because this is not worth my time. And so I learned how to say no, and I learned how to manage my time. And I learned that balance is maybe a bit of a false goal, in the sense that it's really tricky to achieve balance.
Right.
But I've learned how to lean in different directions as I'm needed. So sometimes I have to lean into my work because I'm needed and the business is there, the activity is there, and it's necessary that I respond accordingly. And that means sacrificing in other areas of my life, right? And then there's other times where I need to lean into my family, or I need to lean into having a holiday. Now, I think I can't recall not bringing my computer on a holiday.
Right.
But, a few hours in the morning and a catch up in the evening and monitoring throughout the day, you can have some great flexibility in your life. And that's great. So I don't begrudge it at all. But I do try to manage that work-life balance, if you will.
Well, I guess it's hard to,
Right?
So another big thing I wanted to talk about too was being a woman in the industry. I know you started around 2004, so things have changed a lot. I was just wondering how that has affected you, how you've struggled with that, or how you've,
it's interesting. When I started, I believe there was 2 other women commercial realtors in the city. So it really was dominated. The commercial real estate, of course, was dominated by men and often older men, which was part of my reason for wanting to make sure that I had that added education. So I felt confident and I took my time. So I wanted to make sure I had the proper mentorship, and I did. I had a great opportunity with my colleagues who kind of partnered with me, and it felt frustrating in the moment, I remember, because it took years to really kind of branch out on my own and be doing the kind of transactions I envisioned. But I'm grateful for it because I got the opportunity to grow and learn and sort of support in a variety of ways on a variety of transactions, to the point where I felt like I was doing more and more, and by the time I went on my own, it was actually not an adjustment at all.
Right.
So being a woman initially felt a little bit intimidating for sure, and I think for as many missed opportunities where I felt like, I don't think that I was maybe given the same. I've also had opportunities where I think that I know it's been said as much, I've been included because I'm a woman, and they feel, that it's important that we be included on the team. And so I appreciate that. And I think it is what it is, right? Like I think you have to just move forward and do your very best work. And for those people who question your ability, and there has been many over the years for lots of reasons, but I think also that played into it in some cases, you just prove them wrong.
Yeah.
You just work, and over time, I think I've been able to earn their respect through the work that I do. And if they don't give me the opportunity, then that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And I'm given many other opportunities. I think where it becomes a little bit of a struggle is because real estate is such a contact sport, and it is very much relationship driven. As a woman in commercial real estate, you're probably not as likely to be necessarily engaging in the same way as your male counterparts. So you might not be invited to the bar or to the golf club or to the hockey game. So you lose that ability to win the friendships. Right? And friendships in our industry equal transactions, right? It equals trust. And you learn industry knowledge through those friendships because you've built this respect, right? And you also, you get business. That's the bottom line. So there is a bit of an inherent, I would say, disadvantage in that there are still many decision makers out there who own properties, who are doing development, who are engaged in real estate, who are men, right? And so they feel most comfortable amongst their male peers. And so, that has been a little bit of a barrier or a challenge, I will say. But again, I think it is, I sort of just view it as I try not to dwell on it and just do what I do and do it the very best that I can. And I think my work ethic and what I bring to the table in terms of my knowledge and experience it outweighs anything else.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, that was a really loud bus.
No kidding. Well, there's often a bunch of loud stuff going on around here.
Yeah, I bet. So another cool thing we did for this podcast is I mentioned it earlier to you, but we asked our followers to ask some questions. We said, hey, we're going to do an interview with a professional. What are some questions you may want to know? So I just got a couple here.
Perfect.
Yeah, so one was from, I'm not going to say who actually, but one was, what do you wish you started doing earlier in your career when you first started getting into real estate that may have helped out?
Good question. I felt like earlier in my career, I was, I'm not from Victoria, so I didn't know a lot of the people or properties in Victoria. I wish I had maybe canvassed the market and learned kind of the ins and outs of the actual physical bricks and mortar in real estate here, just to be a little bit better acquainted on that side of things. But one thing that I did do, you can always do more, but the networking side was very helpful in those early years, right? So where you're at the lunches, you're attending the Urban Development Institute stuff, you're learning and seeing people. It can be intimidating when you're first there because you don't know as many people in the room and they seem to know each other. But if you keep with it you will get to know them, and they'll become familiar faces. And even if they don't result in, business for you necessarily, it's all contacts that help in one way or another, whether it's just familiarity, like, oh yeah, I know Amanda, she's great, that's all helpful.
Yeah,
just
100%.
Rather than being completely unknown. So I think making those contacts, making those friendships, building sort of a team behind you that you can rely on to ask questions. So, in our industry, lawyers, lenders, appraisers, there's a whole mix of people that help support us in our role. And if you know and can get to know those people, then it can be helpful in any number of ways.
100%. And I think the valuable thing too that we're really lucky to have is social media, right?
Yeah.
It's simple as a couple of LinkedIn clicks to get in touch with some of those people. So
right.
For anyone listening out there that is listening to what Amanda has to say, it's easier to do it for us. So take advantage of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Take advantage and attend those group functions, because I feel like you get a bit of bigger bang for your buck, in the sense that you meet a lot of people, and you're not asking a lot of people's time, but you can talk with someone for 5 or 10 minutes once a month, and that's great.
Yeah.
It builds a little bit of a rapport, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the next question is, what does a typical workday look like for you? And I know you mentioned that they're all hectic. So maybe if it's too hard to quantify it down into one thing, maybe just what you do today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, I like to think I have control of my schedule, but really it's the client who does. So a lot of my work days, there's a lot of emails. So I do spend a considerable amount of time responding to emails.
Right.
But on any given day, there's at least 30 or 40 tasks on my to-do list that need to get done. And some of those tasks take hours. They might be a report or evaluation or a proposal, or I need to draft a purchase and sale agreement or provide commentary on a lease. I'm not a lawyer, but you still want to provide your insights and assistance to your client, or you're working through, improvement plans and a budget associated with that. So it can go in any number of ways, and you have to be responsive. So you can have your plan, and then somebody calls and they want a tour, or they want to write an offer. And now all of a sudden those kind of things need to take precedence, because you want to be, So you just have to be flexible, I think, and sort of work around that. Flexible, responsive. It's not going to be perfect, and prioritize. And being a realtor, I often liken it a bit to being a student. You are forever kind of thinking about the things you still need to do, that you could do better. There's things on your list that, are going to remain on your list, because you just can't seem to get to them until maybe you can find some quiet hours on the weekend or something to try and catch up.
There's always something looming.
Yeah, but that's a good place to be. Busy is good in our industry. You want to be busy. So I think that's a blessing if you can be busy and have all those things to do, and you just have to be focused, to sit down and say, it's not lunches and coffees. It's I'm gonna sit at my desk, and So to answer your question, a lot of my days are spent. I'd say the majority of my time is spent behind a computer, marketing, emails, drafting documents, reviewing documents, walking people through due diligence on any given transaction. And then there's, a day or two of, if you combine the hours, of maybe tours and in-person meetings. So, So, and business is done a bit differently now too, right? Like you can get away with a lot more Zoom and Teams meetings and so on. So that does save, and DocuSign has been nice in the sense that we used to drive around and then you realize you missed an initial and you got to go back. And there's been some very nice advancements that have served us as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I just got one more for you. How would you handle bad PR, and what would you do to protect your self-made brand?
I think one way to handle bad PR is to try and get ahead of it, in the sense that, you probably want to make sure you've reached out to clients on an ongoing basis and ask them to do Google reviews for you or other positive feedback that is out there, so that if ever someone did provide a negative review or a negative post or something, well, it would be largely outweighed by the general consensus and other commentary and feedback about you online already.
Right.
So you're not coming from a backwards position.
Yeah.
You've already got this great profile. So this is a very much an outlier, and hopefully people would see it as that and maybe question and say, is this even valid? It's not in keeping with the rest of this person's or this company's profile online and the work that they do. So I would say trying to get ahead of bad PR is maybe one way, but maybe, if it does happen, if you do experience it, well, I'm not sure. I mean, we do have a person within our company that we would reach out to who would help, depending on the nature of it, of course. But I don't know. Thankfully, I don't think I've had to deal with
That's
that.
good. Well, that's a good.
So I'm grateful, and I mean, I will say, I guess there are ways, you can, if you're anticipating something to be very controversial or garner negative comments or even, back and forths between clients and stuff, well, turn off your comments.
Yeah.
So it just isn't even an option, and then you can move forward and you don't have to worry about having to deal with that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, whole new world, right?
No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, Amanda, thank you.
Yeah.
So
my
much.
Pleasure.
We all really appreciate it so much. Thank you for
Thank
coming on the
you.
show.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I appreciate it. And yeah, good luck to whoever's watching it. Real estate is an exciting and interesting industry to get into, for sure.
Yeah.
Every day is different.
Yeah. All right. Well, hit follow if you haven't. Follow the Uvic Real Estate Club for more podcasts and everything. That's a wrap.
Yeah. Thank you.
That was awesome.